Hello, everyone from across the world. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the human rights crisis that we are seeing following Hamas attack on Israel. My name is Sasha Rotman, the CEO of the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. Today, we have a special webinar while we're going to end in Israel soon, the 12th day of the war, since the horrific crimes committed by Hamas on Saturday, 7th of October, a day that we're never going to forget as the Jewish people and the whole humanity. We are in the 12 days, and I will just provide a short briefing on the situation on the ground right now. Today, we had the visit of President Biden in Israel to share his support for Israel, the IDF, and the population that was victim of this crime. We thank the United States deeply for the support, and not just the United States, United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, and other allies. They've sent their delegation here in Israel. It's very important. While we are fighting the force of hatred, including Hamas and Hezbollah in the north, we need this global support. It's very important. We are doing that as the front line of the Western world these days. And just to report, we had an hour or 2 hours ago, some Katyusha rockets fired from Hezbollah towards communities in Israel. The Katyusha is a sign for Israel because it's a sign that Hezbollah is moving to the next stage of trading. Katyusha is what was the arm used by Hezbollah during Lebanon war, the second Lebanon war. So we know when they start using the Katyusha, it's a sign that maybe things will escalate in the north. We continue to see a lot of fire from Gaza toward the small communities in Israel, in Sderot mainly, massive rockets range during the day down. And we know that Hamas was a little bit calm while President Biden was here. They don't want to have him under a siren alert. That will look very bad for them. So we assume that we're going to see tonight Hamas continue the firing range. I must say that yesterday at the same hour, as I was doing a briefing from my house here in Israel as well, under sirens, alert sirens across the center of Israel. Right now, the IDF is really preparing itself to continue its operation to eradicate Hamas. We see very, very strong Israeli Air Force retaliation and preparation of planning the ground for the next stage, which we obviously don't know, but we can imagine about the ground operation to really take every terrorist that participate in that and eradicate Hamas from the Middle East and from the world. In today's briefing, we're going to explore really the human rights violation, not just in Israel and what they did. That's a big part of it, and for us, the main part and the reason why we start the war, but also what they do to their own population and how they violate international laws, which is very important to understand, especially when we follow what happened yesterday in the Gaza hospital with hundreds of deaths. We're going to start today with Natan Sharansky, who is the chair, the chair of the board of CAM, and a human rights activist, very well known to share his perspective on the Hamas violations. And we will continue with two other experts to share their perspective. And we're going to end the briefing today with two victims of Hamas that they've seen the worst. So please, Natan.
Thank you, Sasha. So it's even difficult to speak about violations of human rights because we have something absolutely extraordinary. On one hand, it's massacre. It's really massive killing of people from the distance of zero, hundreds, and then it was 1,300 people who were killed or in their beds or dancing on the music festival in huge numbers. And at the same time, it is like the biggest pogrom in modern history when victims were not only killed, they were raped, they were burnt alive, the houses and the whole villages were destroyed. If you read the historical big pogroms in Chisinau or the times of civil war in the Russian Empire, this description of those pogroms which seemed so awful, or even if you go back to 300 years ago, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, this one is even more awful. In fact, we try to make sure that our children don't, or our grandchildren don't hear the news because of the description of the awful things. But I think we ourselves didn't yet digest, didn't apprehend what a awful, unprecedented pogrom took place. But you know the difference? Not like all the previous pogroms. It was all on the internet, meaning that if those who were making pogroms really try to hide it from the world, because if they want to continue what they were doing, they understand that the world should not know what's happening. In this case, they were killing people, they were burning people and putting it on the internet immediately. In one case, they put it on the Facebook of their victim, in order all the family, their relatives, their friends will see what they are doing to them. This powerful combination of the biggest massacre, not the biggest, but one of the big massacres in modern history, and by far the biggest and most cruel pogrom at the same time, make it obvious that to speak here about violation of human rights, violation of international law, there is nothing to talk about. And at the same time, those who were making it known to the world, they first, on one hand, they wanted to make us desperate, to humiliate us, to make sure that we will not have any, we will be paralyzed by fear. And of course, they were absolutely wrong about it. But on the other hand, they hoped that the world will treat it with understanding. And here I have to say that, after all, our organization is committed to showing to the world again and again the connection between old and new anti-Semitism. What is all our struggle for recognizing accepting international definition of anti-Semitism? All this is about that criticism of Israel at some moments can become anti-Semitic. The demonization of Israel, demonization of Jewish people are both anti-Semitism. And here we have like the moment of moral clarity. There is no discussion that is the biggest anti-Semitic event since Holocaust. Everybody will agree that it's pure, the most primitive, the most rude anti-Semitism. And then we have reaction of some, not many, but some intellectuals and student organization of Harvard and Stanford and Penn University, that's part of anti-colonial liberation movement. That's part of resistance, maybe sometimes not absolutely fair, but definitely legitimate resistance of Palestinian people to Israeli oppressors. So if you want to have better proof how this fight against Israel and this pure anti-Semitism are meeting, and in fact, meaning the same, that's the most clear proof that, yes, hate to Israel and hate to Jews go together hand in hand. And it is very important that the free world will recognize this very deep connection. You expect that after all these unbelievable crimes and then demonstrations of solidarity with the criminals, that at least the leaders of the intellectual world, the leaders of those universities where these demonstrations taking place, will make it very clear that anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism, pogrom is pogrom, and we condemn and will do everything that, and we have to do everything that those who are responsible for this will be punished. Instead of this, we here, no, there are many organizations, many people, many leaders of the free world who are expressing their solidarity and their anger and condemnation. But the leaders of the leading academical institutes are speaking about to stop violence on both sides, like President Putin called to stop violence. Well, Russia has invested interest. Their closest partner is Iran, and Iran is behind all this. But the leaders of academy, they can speak about violence on both sides when we have the most awful, unbelievable pogrom. I have to say, to this day, we are not ready to tell ourselves the full picture. And the one who is exposed to the real horrifying stories and knowing how much we keep as a secret from our own society, because we cannot really believe that that's what's happening in Israel, in the modern world, in our times, when people can know immediately, and they know immediately the truth, what is happening, and they can tolerate it. It has to be removed immediately. The Hamas has to stop existing in this world. That's threat to existence of the state of Israel, but that's also free world cannot accept that people who are making these crimes today will keep existing. So, if in case of, let's say, Ukraine, that I'm very much involved in, I condemn the crimes of Russia, and I do hope that there will be international court will bring to justice Russian leaders for their crimes. Here, you don't have to even to collect any proofs. That's by the most fundamental definitions that the biggest massacre and biggest pogrom in the modern history, made with sadism, with all the aspects when we speak about Daesh, when we see these awful pictures of beheading the people. Here it was all, it happened simultaneously in hundreds of the peaceful houses with the thousands of youth who were dancing on music festival. And we have no choice. We have to destroy Hamas. It has to stop existing. It has secret weapon, and I wrote about it on the first day of the war in Washington Post, that the secret weapon of our enemies are their own children and their own peaceful population. They will use them as shield, a living shield, and they will try that as many as possible of their own children will be killed in order to mobilize the world to protect them from us. And the world should not permit them to go away with this crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, for this explanation. And yes, it's very important to mention the targeting of civilians by Hamas, only civilians. As we move to the next speaker, Major in Reserve Ben Wolof, working on the legal perspective from the International Law Department of the IDF and also a spokesperson of the IDF, just to remind that the IDF released evidence of the rocket that destroyed the Gaza hospital yesterday, very fast. Videos, evidence, phone calls between jihadists from Gaza, and everything to demonstrate to the world. And yet it took hours for the media to correct, and still now is not corrected. And even legislators that have been posting and tweeting about that haven't corrected their information. And I think it's critical in the time of war that we deal with human life to be correct and to respect those that passed away during the wartime, and it's a part of it. So Major Ben Wolof, please.
Thank you, Sasha, and my deepest condolences to those here who've been witnessed and survived the horrors of last Saturday. Israel is now in war, and our war is against Hamas. But Hamas's war is a war against civilians. It started with this brutal massacre of over 1,300 people, and unfortunately that number is rising, because we are still retrieving bodies as we do specialized raids across the border into Gaza. We are collecting bodies. We've had to defuse booby-trapped bodies that were left in homes designed to detonate as people came to pick them up. And in some cases where entire families have been wiped out, we have no one to gather DNA from in order to identify them. So unfortunately, that number is still rising. In addition to that massacre, they abducted some 200 Israeli citizens and are holding them hostage in Gaza. They are firing rockets continuously and indiscriminately into our Israeli population centers. And at the same time, they are using their own population to defend those rockets, to protect those rockets, to hide their military operations, and to evade attack from the IDF, and to exploit any civilian harm for their own purposes. They are not only using their civilian population as human shields, they are also stealing from them. Some of you may have seen that UNRWA was forced to admit a couple of days ago that Hamas people broke into one of their warehouses and stole fuel enough fuel that could serve their desalination plants for 6 days. Obviously, that did not get to their civilian population. In the first day of the attacks, when they fired rockets into Israel, they hit 9 out of 10 electricity lines going from Israel into Gaza, taking them out of action. They hit 1 out of the 3 water pipes going from Israel, taking it out of action. They destroyed the Erez crossing, where before Saturday, tens of thousands of Gazan workers would come in every day with work permits to work inside Israel. They killed people that worked there that I served with. They abducted others. And the other main crossing into Israel, the Keren Shalom crossing, is under fire as we speak. They also killed their own people. As we saw last night, Islamic Jihad fired a rocket from Gaza intended for Israel. It fell short, it misfired, landed on a hospital. According to the Palestinians' own reports, there are 500 cases of death, but we cannot verify those claims. All these actions of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad constitute clear war crimes. They constitute clear crimes against humanity, and they may constitute genocide. The war crimes they are committing is intentionally and directly targeting civilians, which is a clear violation of the principle of distinction, which requires you only to direct your attacks against military targets and those involved in the hostilities. They are violating the principle where each side must take steps to protect their own civilian population and separate them from the hostilities. They attacked specially protected objects. On Saturday, they attacked an ambulance and first responders. There were reports that they also stole ambulances from Israel and took them back into Gaza. They have committed the crime of perfidy by dressing as IDF soldiers and dressing as civilians in order to carry out attacks. They have violated the prohibition against taking of hostages, which includes soldiers when you want to use them for bargaining chips. They have violated prohibition against booby trapping certain objects, including bodies. All these violations are reflected in customary international law. They're reflected in the Geneva Conventions and the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions, and they're reflected clearly in international criminal law. You may see a reference of that in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. These crimes also constitute crimes against all of humanity. Crimes against humanity are defined as those that are widespread and systematic and are part of a policy. Hamas's policy is clear. It's stated explicitly in its charter that its intention is to wipe out Israel, kill as many Jews as they can. And these attacks were widespread and no doubt systematic, and they are ongoing. These crimes could also constitute genocide. They have a clear intent to destroy a group or a part of a group, Israelis and Jews, and their intent is clearly to carry it out, and they have tried to carry it out by committing mass murder. Now, this means we are in an asymmetric conflict because on the other side, we have the state of Israel and the IDF. The IDF is the military of a country that is democratic, committed to Western values and the rule of the law. We are subject to oversight, and we work with transparency. The IDF targets military targets. We are targeting Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza. We are targeting their command and control centers, their rocket depots, terrorists themselves, all in accordance with the principle of distinction. We also take precautions. We have seen in the media that the IDF has, in various means and methods and mediums, given warnings to the civilian population in Gaza. We are trying to evacuate people in northern Gaza, where Hamas is most concentrated. We are trying to evacuate them to southern Gaza. We have issued these warnings, these recommendations to evacuate various means, radio messages, TV, dropping leaflets, using international organizations, and so on. We are asking these people to evacuate to the south of Gaza for their safety. Even though we continue to operate in the south of Gaza, it will be of a less intensity than the north, and it will be only until the fighting is done. We have legal advisors in the IDF who are well trained. We provide education to our commanders, and we provide ongoing legal advice in routine times and during times of emergency. This is not easy. We are fighting an enemy that deliberately places itself under and within and amongst the civilian population. They provide their civilian population with no defenses, no shelters, no safe areas. They block them trying to evacuate the northern Gaza with roadblocks and threats, and they lie. Sasha mentioned the instance of the hospital yesterday. They have no problem saying to the world, blaming Israel for things which they know, and we have shown that they knew that this was their fault. And they have no qualms about showing off dead bodies which they know are their fault and blaming Israel, possibly igniting an entire region. When we saw those incidents, we couldn't believe, because we didn't think that's something the IDF would do. And we made sure to check that there was no technical malfunction with any bombs. And when we realized we had no strikes within the area at that time, we checked our operational systems, checked our radar, saw that there was trajectory rocket fire from nearby the hospital. We analyzed the aerial footage and saw that the blast detonation was not blasts that resulted of IDF missiles, but rather more likely from rockets. And we intercepted intelligence of Hamas operatives talking about how they realized it was an Islamic Jihad missile rocket that fell short, and what are they going to do? Once we had checked and rechecked and double-checked our information, we released it. That takes time, and the damage was already done in the media. And I'm sure you've seen that around the world, we were condemned by world leaders. There were riots throughout the Middle East. The damage is done. And that is an example of the disadvantage that we are at in this asymmetric conflict. But we are comfortable with that disadvantage because we know that at the end of the day, those who abide by the rule of law, those who live by the values of peace and caring for life, we will win. We also have this challenge in the north. And I think the IDF, Israel, and the US, including President Biden, have made it very clear that no one wants to see this conflict widen, and we're hoping that that will be the case. So we thank everyone for their support. We thank the US, we thank President Biden and all the military who are here supporting Israel, and we hope that we continue to stand side by side.
Thank you, Major Ben Wallace. I have one more follow-up question. I think it's very important to understand. And we see the massive destruction in Gaza right now. And the idea of targeting even civilian buildings and that are legitimate targets by international law as well. Can you explain a little bit how the IDF is selecting these targets and what makes sense for civilian targets to turn into a military target?
The IDF does not target civilian targets. We only target military targets according to international law. Now, if you walk into Gaza and you ask a Hamas operative to take you to his military base, he has nowhere to take you. There are no military bases inside Gaza. There are only residential homes, mosques, schools, hospitals, and the like that are being used by Hamas, either within or under for their military operations. And under international law, a military target is one that is being used, or its purpose or its location contributes to the military objectives. So a residential home, when it's used as a command and control center or a weapons depot by Hamas, becomes a legitimate military target under international law. It does not mean that you can attack it without any precautions, without attempts to mitigate civilian harm, but it does make it a legitimate target.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important point because the pictures in the media needs to be understood why there are destruction in what appears to be a civilian area, but at the end is a military target because they hire rockets there, or they use these places for headquarters and other means of communication also for Hamas terrorists in Gaza. So thank you very much, and good luck for your job to protect us in Israel, Major Ben Wallace. Thank you. I would like to move on now to the founder of NGO Monitor, Professor Gerald Steinberg. I'm sorry that I'm moving, but we have big explosion here. I'm in Tel Aviv. Hopefully it's not siren alert, so probably in the neighborhood close by. So Gerald Steinberg is one of the top leaders and researchers in the world to understand the terror organization, how they work, with who they work, and how they operate, outside also of the military operation, but on the systematic structure. So please, Gerald, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I also share in sending my sincere tanchumim, my condolences. It's been extremely, extremely difficult for everybody in Israel, and particularly those who had to go through the terrible events of last Shabbat. What I'm going to talk about specifically is the weaponization of human rights in international law. We've just heard Ben talk about how the IDF is very careful in what it does in order to stay within the frameworks of international law, and how many of the accusations that are made are in fact false, entirely false. This is a massive industry. This is something that's been going on for 25 years, and the purpose is very clear. And we saw it again yesterday when Israel was blamed immediately in the New York Times and the BBC, by NGOs, by diplomats, for bombing a hospital, deliberately bombing, for a strike, it was termed, an Israeli strike against a hospital in Gaza. The whole purpose of all of these claims, many of which have been false, this is not the first time, probably one of the worst examples, but not at all the first time, to turn Israel into the image of the world's worst human rights violator. In the United Nations and the Human Rights Council, 4 times a year, at least, Israel is condemned with resolutions and reports, far more than most of the other countries combined, more than Russia and Ukraine, of course, more than Syria, more than many other countries where there are conflicts. This is not just a tactic, it's a strategy. It's a strategy that is the modern anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, Jew hatred, it all goes together. Abusing the language, manipulating the language, the frameworks, the institutions of human rights, the ones that we created in the wake of the Holocaust. It's a form of Holocaust inversion. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, on which its entire structure is built, that was adopted by the United Nations in 1948, it's the 75th anniversary in early December, was written in the shadow of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, to guarantee never again. And it is that declaration and the institutions that were created on that basis that have been weaponized against the Jewish people and against Israel. We need to understand that. And then we also need, and I'll spend a few minutes talking about how we can fight that, how we can deal with that successfully, in my view. But it's important for us to understand the phenomenon. The way in which Israel's turned into aggressors, monsters, and Palestinian murderers, genocidal mass murders, and people who commit terrible massacres are turned into victims. The human rights institutions, the people who are called the most respected experts, the frameworks, the NGOs, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, the United Nations Human Rights Council, are propagandists for this campaign. Their goal, not only to turn Israel and the Jewish people into monsters, but also to prevent Israel from being able to defend its citizens, because everything that Israel does is condemned as a violation of human rights. And that's also one of the reasons that Israel was not prepared to deal with the onslaught that we saw 2 weeks ago, because every time Israel seeks to disarm Hamas, to fight back against Hamas has 30,000 rockets, 30,000, which they made by stealing humanitarian aid. Every one of those rockets is a double human rights violation. It's a double violation of international law. They're aimed at Israeli civilians, which is obviously a violation of international law, but they're also placed under houses and under schools and under mosques and under health clinics and all of those places. All those are violations of international law. Does the, quote, international community care about that? Do they condemn? Do they take any action? No. And that's something that we need to hold those people who claim to promote human rights responsible for. We've heard year after year, month after month, allegations of Israel committing war crimes, of abusing children, of apartheid. That was the big theme in the last 5 years. If you accuse a country of apartheid and you claim to have evidence, but you're really saying it has no right to exist. Apartheid countries have no right to exist. Israel being placed into the category of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And that we see this over and over and over again. The Gaza hospital incident we saw last night, it's more than an incident. The automatic headlines, 10, 15 minutes after what they call the Gaza Health Ministry or Health Services. That's a Hamas propaganda organization. The New York Times has a headline, Israel bombed a hospital in Gaza, 500 dead. They changed it slowly overnight because they were embarrassed and they were forced to acknowledge the truth. The BBC, I don't think, has even done that much. CNN says, well, we have now an Israeli version and a Palestinian version, giving them equal weight. And that's how the human rights industry works. Let me say a few words about the details of the human rights industry. Who is responsible? This is a very, very powerful industry. I talk to a lot of people. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And most people look at this, at the organizations as voluntary, as being standing up against the powerful governments that violate human rights, groups like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all the Palestinian groups, Oxfam. Amnesty International has a budget over $350 million a year. It's far more than any State Department or Israeli foreign ministry or any, and they use the amount of money and resources and staff members that they focus on attacking Israel, on these false allegations, on what we call the lethal narratives of Israeli violations, is hugely disproportionate to any other part of the world, mixed very often with fundamental theological, historical anti-Semitism, blood libels, repeated time after time. Human Rights Watch, based in New York, has an annual budget over $100 million, has almost the identical agenda as Amnesty. Their reports and Amnesty's reports are almost identical. A few years ago, Amnesty issued what they called a breakthrough report demonstrating that Israel's an apartheid state. Human Rights Watch followed a year later. Both were covered in major articles in the New York Times within hours after they were put online. And none of the journalists who wrote this had any time to examine hundreds of dozens of pages with hundreds of footnotes. We looked at those, and it's recycled propaganda, all of them quoting each other. And they form a major part of this community. You add to that at least 50 Palestinian human rights organizations, and I use that very, very cautiously. These aren't human rights organizations. They appear in the United Nations. They're quoted in the media. Reuters ran a story about Al-Haq condemning yesterday's terrible Israeli lethal attack on a Gaza hospital, violation of international law, all of that. And they called Al-Haq a respected Palestinian human rights organization. Al-Haq and another 15 similar organizations are part of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine terror network. 8 of them have been designated by the Israeli government. The ones in Gaza, because it's outside of Israel, have not been designated. But you can see in NGO monitors traced their close connection with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. These are not human rights organizations, yet they take the floor time after time in Geneva at the Human Rights Council. They speak in parliaments. Their representatives speak in the US Congress, in testifying committees. They're not exposed the way they should be as part of this terrorist front, with no credentials, no basic capability of assessing any kind of human rights standing. There are close to 50 of these kinds of organizations that are funded primarily by European governments and by the UN to promote this agenda. And then there's the United Nations itself, with a number of different frameworks, but particularly the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council meets 4 times a year. It has a permanent agenda. There is one country that is a focus of the permanent agenda, permanent item 7, and that is Israel, which means that 4 times a year, and in emergency sections more often, there is speaker after speaker, the same NGOs, the same kind of language, the same kind of false claims that are presented, and they become the basis for the United Nations Human Rights Council reports condemning Israel for human rights violations. Many of you may remember Richard Goldstone. His name was on a report in 2009 that accused Israel back then of human rights violations, systematic violations of international law, war crimes, crimes against humanity, based almost entirely on the false and unverified claims of these same non-governmental organizations. The United States has called out the Human Rights Council a number of times. Under President George W. Bush and later President Trump, the United States left the Human Rights Council, recognizing that it was an entirely false framework that was doing more damage to human rights than in promoting human rights. And that's something that now the Biden administration has returned to the Human Rights Council. And they said at the time, and Secretary of State Blinken said, we are returning to the Human Rights Council in order to improve, to battle, to call out the focus on Israel, the bias against Israel, the obsession with Israel. Well,
Gerald,
unfortunately, they failed.
We're going to need to finish soon because I know
Okay.
that you're the
So
next speaker.
this is the picture, this is the image we're dealing with. In order to fight against this, we need to be informed. We need to have the evidence of what is actually going on and the lies that are being expressed and circulated by these organizations. It's a slow process because the world doesn't want to hear that. The journalists that I speak to start off by saying, well, you're a propaganda organization, you're affiliated, which is false, with the Israeli government. They do the propaganda, but time after time, they're embarrassed by reprinting false claims. You need to go to the diplomats, the political leaders, the academics, and show them case after case. And finally, we need to cut off the funding. Amnesty International should not be getting $350 million a year. Human Rights Watch should not be getting $110 million a year from donors who should know better, but don't check. They have these dinners that are held and they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in New York and Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Toronto, Sydney. And I think there we need to be far more active in showing all those people who are still providing them with this funding that they are in fact contributing to enabling of genocidal terrorism, as we saw 2 weeks ago. This is not human rights. It is the opposite of human rights, and it needs to be called out. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Really appreciate your words. And yes, this is not human rights. Moving on to his not human rights statement, I would like to invite Yoav Shimoni. Yoav Shimoni, and we are sorry for your loss. Yoav lost his grandmother in a terrific attack, in terrific condition. And you are here to tell the story of your grandmother from kibbutz near Oz, where I think that still it's evaluated that 25% of the kibbutz has been disappearing, both murdered or kidnapped. You can imagine only if 25% of your city will have disappeared one day, one moment, in terrible conditions. Yoav, thank you very much for opening your story to the world, and it's so important that we hear your voice, please.
Thank you. And just first of all, to emphasize what you just said, I believe it's a bit more than just having 25% of your city disappear, as the kibbutz and all of the kibbutz movement were such tight-knit communities that were self-reliant on each other. And I don't know, we've been raising funds and stuff to rebuild it, but I don't know how that's going to happen with the community, the infrastructure, and the homes of all these people being destroyed. My personal story with my grandmother is that because kibbutz Nir Oz is one of the front lines and one of the closest points to the Gaza border, during the infiltration Saturday, the 7th, the terrorists infiltrating the missile parade started onto Israel. I was communicating with my family, making sure everyone's safe, everyone's in the shelter, and everyone is all right. And then after a few minutes of everyone confirming their safety, including my grandmother, and my grandmother more concerned about my aunt and my mom's safety, who were in Tel Aviv and another part of Israel, my sister flagged on our family group chat that my grandma posted a video on her Facebook. So we immediately went to her Facebook and saw that there was a video of her lying on her living room floor, covered with blood, with terrorists standing above her. And that was 2 to 3 hours before Israel and the news media announced the terrorist infiltration into Israel. So for the first few hours, we were all kind of in disbelief, trying to figure out what's happening. And then as the information started pouring out, more and more horrific details about the event were arising, like the fact that they not only murdered her and a lot of other people in the kibbutz, they also burned down their houses. They kidnapped kids, elderly women, and took them into Gaza. And then all the stories of the surrounding kibbutzes and the festival and everything else that's been happening in the Otef came pouring out. And unfortunately, it's not over yet, as the major said earlier, it is still very difficult to first identify the bodies, which is why my family and I weren't even able to sit Shiva or do a funeral for my grandmother, because we have not been able to identify her body yet, even though we did have the option to submit DNA and to provide more details to the army and to the Shabak to help find her, but she has not been found yet. And yeah, it's just been a horrific week and a bit.
Thank you, Yoav. So that's terrible as a grandson to see on Facebook the murdering of his own grandmother by Hamas terrorists. The sadistic animosity that the Hamas committed such crime also by killing someone, broadcasting on Facebook and then burning everything around them. I think that is terrible. So at this stage, you couldn't go back to near us to see the house?
No, I've received videos of one of my grandma's neighbor's houses, which was also completely burned. And right now, because it's so close to the border, it's unsafe to be there. And we, again, even the army that is currently placed there is not being able to identify the body or find. So in the official reports, my grandmother is still reported as missing, but the video quite confirmed her situation, unfortunately.
Yes. Thank you. So like Major Ben Wallace mentioned, that the numbers will probably grow even more as she's considered as missing and not killed anymore. So I wish that you can find her body and start the Shiva properly to recover from these wounds that you're probably going through, you and your family. So thank you, Yoav, for sharing your little part. And I think it's important to tell you that we stand by you, not organization. You have people around the world, and I hope you see the images from cities, from countries, from places across the globe with Israeli flags, blue and white, to say we support, and this is for you, for people that have been suffering. So we encourage everyone here also today to make sure that they share more support. We need them for Yoav, for the 1,400 other families that are going through, and why Ben described a little genocide based on international law. So thank you, Yoav, for testifying today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. I would like to invite also Natalie Senjani. Natalie is American, Israeli-American, Iranian Israeli-American. She's in Long Island. She's a young person, as you can see, but she loves dancing, she loves music. And she went to one of the most beautiful festivals that you can find in Israel, close by. I don't know if any one of you have been in this region, but it's a beautiful region of peace. And they went 2,000 young people like Natalie to a music festival to dance and love each other, meet people and enjoy. And Natalie was there because it's what she wanted to do, and Hamas decided that the festival will end differently. And we're glad that you survived, Natalie, and we're glad that you are here to share what you have seen yourself. So thank you very much, and please, you can share your story.
Thank you. I was at the festival. I was there with a number of other Israeli kids. And from the group that I was with, I was the only American. When the rockets first started coming at around 6:30, one of the other girls that we were with came to me just to explain to me what's happening. She had said there have been some rockets that were sent our way. They have been intercepted. Everything should be fine. It's kind of normal for the area that we're in. It'll probably just be a few, and then it'll pass, and we'll continue with this beautiful festival, with our dancing, with our music. If anyone can imagine anywhere else in the world that kids were at a music festival and suddenly rockets are being intercepted over their head, no other children would react the way these kids reacted. No other children would react in such a calm manner. Any other kids anywhere else in the world would have ran right away. But what people need to understand is that for Israeli kids, this is their reality. This is something that they've grown up with. This is something they've seen numerous times. They've been in bomb shelters more times than they can probably count. So in the beginning, nobody understood the severity of what was about to happen. Nobody could have predicted what was about to happen, because seeing rockets is something pretty normal for them. After a few minutes, we kept waiting to see if the rockets would stop, and it was just one after the other. Boom, boom, boom. They kept coming. After a few minutes, the festival security had shut off the music and requested that everybody pick up their things and evacuate to their cars. We evacuated to our cars, and at this point, we still don't completely understand the severity of the situation. Yes, we see that rockets are still coming, but in our heads, we think to ourselves, okay, we have the Iron Dome, we're at our cars, we'll drive out of here, there's going to be traffic, it will take some time, but for the most part, we felt fairly safe. I had asked my friends that I had came with to the festival if they thought I had enough time to go to the bathroom quickly. And they said, yes, go to the bathroom. We're going to have a long drive. You might as well go now. A couple of days ago, I saw a video that had surfaced of the Hamas terrorists coming to those exact bathrooms moments after I was there and just shooting at every stall and just trying to kill anybody who might be hiding inside. And to see that, it hit very hard for me, knowing that I was there just a few moments before and that I could have been there when they had arrived. I went back to the car after going to the bathroom, and we started driving in the direction that the festival security told us to drive in. I want to mention the fact that the festival security really did their best to guide everyone to safety, and most of them did die trying to protect us. We drove in one direction, and eventually they asked us to turn around and drive in another direction. At this point, this was one of the points where we start to get a little bit more nervous, where we feel like we don't understand everything that's happening. We turn around and start driving in the other direction, and eventually the festival security asks everyone to pull over to the side of the dirt road and get out of their cars and start running. Another thing I want to mention is that this festival took place in a big field, and most of this field you couldn't drive down. So just imagine thousands of kids trying to drive down one dirt road, trying to get out. When they asked us to pull over our cars, I couldn't understand why they would ask us to do that. In my mind, it was just rockets. Driving out was the fastest way to get to safety. But we listened to them. We pulled over our car to the side of the road. We're sitting in the car for a moment, and that's when we hear the first gunshots, and that's when we realize that it's not just rockets, that the terrorists are here on foot, that they're a few feet away, and that they have guns and that they're shooting at us. We opened our doors and we just started to run for our lives. One of the most terrifying moments was after a while of running in one specific direction, I suddenly see dozens of other children running in my direction. And I realize that the direction I'm running in is not the direction of safety, and that they're running from a terrorist and that they're being shot at. Nobody knew what direction was safe. Basically, no direction was safe. They were coming at us from multiple directions. And suddenly when you see these kids running towards you, you realize you have to change directions, and you don't know what decision is going to be the right decision. Every decision we made either saved our lives or got us killed. And we had no way of knowing what decision would save our lives. At a certain point, after running for a while, we passed by a ditch, and there were a number of kids hiding in this ditch, and they told us to come hide with them, to hide from the terrorists. And we almost did, until one of my friends said, no, if we hide in this ditch and they surround us from above and they find us, that's it, we're done for. We have nowhere to run. We decided to keep running, and we later found out that the kids that did stay back and hid in the ditch had been murdered. We continued running for about 4 hours. Somewhere in the middle of that, we did come across a police officer. There wasn't much he could do to protect us. All he had was a handgun. He couldn't even call for backup because the terrorists had taken over the local police station and had taken over their radio station, and you could hear the terrorists yelling on his walkie-talkie. But he walked along our side. He did his best to guide us in the right direction, which was to the town of Patish, which was the nearest town to seek refuge and safety. After about 4 hours of running from gunshots, and you couldn't even tell what direction the gunshots were coming from. You couldn't tell where you should run to, but you just ran. We decided to sit under a tree to catch our breath. We hadn't heard gunshots in maybe a minute or two, and we thought it was a good moment to catch our breath. At this point, a white pickup truck starts coming in our direction, and our first reaction was thinking that it's a terrorist coming to shoot us. And we thought to get up and we thought to run, and we all just kind of looked at each other and sat back down because we realized we have nowhere to run to. Once the car got closer, we saw that there was a girl in the car who was wearing the festival bracelet, and we realized this was a man from the town of Patish who had come in the direction of the terrorists, who had left his town and risked his own life to come save innocent kids. We all got in the back of his car. I never even got this man's name. I never even got to thank him, because as soon as he dropped us off in the town of Patish, he drove back and risked his life all over again to save more kids. Once we got to the town, we started to hear more information of what was happening outside, what was happening at the kibbutz, what the terrorists were doing. The people of the town of Patish were so incredible. The way they came together to take care of us, to bring us to the bomb shelter. There were people walking around with lists of names of kids whose families haven't been able to get in touch with them all this time, and were worried that they were either kidnapped or killed already. And they walked around reading off the list of names, hoping that one of these kids was in the town and safe. Just the way I've seen the country come together, and the way I've seen people come together and protect each other and help each other, has been so incredible to see. And as someone who made it out alive, a lot of people have asked me how I've been feeling, if I've cried. I don't cry for myself. I made it out, but I cry for all those who were right next to me, dancing next to me all night, who had a much different fate than mine, who have been kidnapped, who have been killed. We were all there to just enjoy in peace and have fun and dance to beautiful music, and this is what happened to them.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm sorry that you have to live with that in your mind, in your memories. I'm sorry that this is what you have been going through, you and all those that have been there, that survive, and all those going to remember and support those that didn't survive. And hopefully, yeah, I don't have hope for that. I just hope that one day we'll see an Israel without this terror. So thank you for sharing your story, Natalie. I think it's important that the world knows this, that you are the target of Hamas. This is what the Hamas is targeting. Like, we are humans that wants to enjoy the life and live their life while we are confronting a terrorist organization. I think that today's briefing was demonstrating what it means to be a terrorist organization. I think this is critical as we see that this terrorist organization have more support in the streets of the United States, of Europe, and other places. And this is what they support. When today you raise the Hamas flag, you support the fact that they attack someone like Natalie, the grandmother of Yoav, that they fire rockets at hospital, that they use their own population and human shield. This is a very big human rights violation, and this is what they support. And I will even go further, that the Palestinian cause has lost its legitimacy by having Palestinian flag in the street supporting the Palestinian cause while Jews have been murdered by a genocidal terror organization. We'll expect the world to stand up with us at this stage, and our Palestinian neighbors that we are living together today to stand together with us. And we hope the world will understand that there is no place on earth, and I'm saying that loud and clear, for such terror organization in the world. And I think that this is the message that everyone needs to know. We are in 2023, modern societies, modern universe. We don't accept this organization to be a neighbor of Israel, to want to destroy the Jewish state, to kill all Jews. This is what they try to do. And Israel has the right to defend itself. And thanks to the support of the United States and other allies, we're going to do it. And hopefully you're going to all continue to support our causes. So thank you, Natalie, for sharing this.
I'd like to say one more thing. For those who don't already understand, for those who in the past have been pro-Palestine, the rallies that you're doing right now pro-Palestine, this is not what this war is about. This war is not about Palestine. This war, Hamas is not pro-Palestine. Hamas is just as complicit in the deaths of innocent Palestinians as they are in the deaths of all these innocent Israelis. This is not what this war is about. And anyone who is going out in the streets with their Palestinian flag, this is not the time. If you are pro-Palestine and that is the side that you are on, all the power to you. But this is not the time. This is not what this war is about. This war is about Hamas. War is about a terrorist organization killing innocent people. Killing innocent people does not free Palestine. This is not the path to that. This is not the way you do it. If that's something that you support, choose a different time for your protest. This is not the right time for this. This is a war against a terrorist organization. And that's something that people need to realize. And that's something that people need to get through their heads.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more than what you said. And I think this are very strong words. I just want to invite everyone as we try to recover from this trauma. The Israeli society have hundreds of thousands displaced people across the country that move from different places. We have people with enormous needs, immediate needs also, even young people that needs post-trauma recovery process. And all the families who have been displaced are looking for support. So we launch an emergency fund that we invite everyone to contribute. And with the generous support of the donors of the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, every donation has been matched, and every donation has been then divided to different organizations with immediate needs in Israel. So we invite you to come to our website, combatantisemitism.org, and to make a donation to support the cause of Israelis. We're going to also put the link as a follow-up email to all those that joined the webinar. And please share the message of Natalie, of Yoav, and those that you heard also, both from Ben, Gerald, and Nathan. So thank you everyone for supporting us, for being with us. And feel free to contact our organization to ask questions, to receive information, to be educated. And if you miss anything, we are here to help. And we invite you to follow us on social media, where we're updating with information from the ground, from the situation, and from what's happening here in Israel. So thank you all for your support. And hopefully we're going to come and to see you again for better times.